In a way, there's a conversation or this idea that Guatemala should have a contemporary art museum that's been going on for a long time, even before us.
There's a museum of modern art, and the natural next step is to create a contemporary art museum.
The artists Jessica and Stefan rented this egg-shaped structure in Guatemala City and opened NuMu, the first contemporary art museum in Guatemala. And since they've been presenting new exhibitions in that space. I met Jessica and Stefan in 2014 when a couple of other curators and I were in Guatemala doing some research for a Universal History of Infamy, one of the Pacific Standard Time exhibitions. And we really fell in love with the project. And seeing the work they were doing, we decided to invite them to be a part of the exhibition. From that invitation, Jessica and Stefan decided to have a replica of the egg built in Guatemala. They put the replica on a truck and plan to take it on a road trip from Guatemala all the way through Mexico and to Los Angeles. In the summer of 2017, there were 2 NuMu eggs. One being the one in Guatemala City that would continue the programming, and the other that would make its way up to Los Angeles.
One Sunday afternoon I was driving down one of the main streets and I saw this incredible structure that I had seen many times with a sign that said for rent. And so I called the owner and I'm like, we need to meet. And he's like, yeah, we can meet and I can show you the space tomorrow, Monday. And I'm like, no, it has to be today. It has to be Sunday. And so I kind of insisted a bit, and half an hour, 45 minutes later, together with a friend, we were visiting the space.
I remember I was in New York and Stefan called me up and he's like,
guess where I went today? And she's like, where'd you go? And I'm like, I went to the egg.
And he's like, guess what? The egg is available and it's up for rent.
And then there was a little silence and we had that kind of aha moment where we were both like, NuMu, this is it.
This was just within, I think, a few hours or a day or two, we decided we were renting it. And the space itself shaped up everything else. This egg-shaped structure resolved a lot of issues for us right away because, first of all, you don't have to pay that much rent. You don't have to fill up a huge space with art. So it just turned out like a really good option. Despite the fact that NuMu is 2.5 meters tall by 2.5 meters wide, roughly, we decided that it should be modeled after first world, the best museums out there. One of the first things we did was the name. It's Nuevo Museo Arte Contemporáneo, but you shorten it up, it's NuMu, similar to MoMA, MoCA, and so on.
With this very official looking logo, we went on Facebook and social media and started to promote the opening of this project.
We laid out 3 to 4 exhibitions a year, each paired up with an educational component and some kind of interdisciplinary project. But we felt that unless we designed it and set it up like a a real museum, we couldn't level up and challenge it and also be taken seriously.
We've started to fill in a lot of the gaps that a national museum should be doing, right? Such was the case with a project around Joaquín Orellana. That had been a project that we had started with Alejandro Torun, who's a very close friend of NuMu.
Joaquín Orellana is not a musician, he's an artist. But he created this series of instruments. What he says is like putting dynamite into a marimba and then all these different instruments just started to blow up out of it, into space and in different sounds and different spectrums.
Ahora levántenlo, tírenlo por la ventana. Se podrían criticar como un tipo que la marimba es un tabú y destruye la marimba. Tal vez, no, pero esa no es mi intención es idealizarla.
Art Basel has a crowdfunding campaign and they invited NuMu. Stefan and Jessica decided that the project was going to be about Orellana. We did a Kickstarter campaign to raise funds to record some of his most important works that had not been properly recorded. First time he composed a work 100% only his sound utensils, which are his instruments that he's more known for, that are all derived from the marimba, and that's where maybe most of his uniqueness comes from.
Realmente el útil sonoro derivado de la marimba lo que establece es el sonido de la marimba en otras formas de articulación que con el mismo sonido medular tiene otras bifurcaciones sonoras, ¿verdad?
I knew about Orellana, and I knew superficially about his work, but I really didn't understand the complexities of it. Through that process, we really started talking, like, this is a brilliant mind. He's still alive. Most of the people from his generation, they're gone. And with this guy, he's an absolute genius, and really he's had no support throughout his life. He's very vulnerable. Anything could happen to him because of his age, because of the socioeconomic conditions that he lives in. And all his work of more than 50 years could very easily just evaporate.
We got together with him and asked him, what would you like to happen? And he's like, most of my work has not been properly documented, and I would like for it to stay relevant in the future.
Additionally, we could make drawings of each one of the instruments, like architectural drawings, and then we could also do a recording of sorts with him explaining each one of the instruments that he invented, what they are, what the history is, like where they come from, what he was thinking, and also how they should be played and what they should sound like.
Esto sería como un insulto del violín, ¿no? Con muchos de estos, el sonido de la marimba se dispersa en muchas alturas y diferentes ritmos. Se trata de diferentes velocidades, ¿no?
And through that process, what this does is that it ensures that a future generation, when he's not around, is able to understand his work and appreciate his work and continue to experience it. Of course, for that to happen, that also meant that we would have to restore his sound utensils to get them to sound the way they should. I think we had a goal of maybe like $15,000 or $20,000 with which we'd be able to record one of the works. And we were able, in the end, to record 4 of his most emblematic works and also produce a concert in the National Theater.
Avanza, marimba, avanza, lanza, grita, penetra, desgarra la tierra, danza feroz inventa, destruye las vallas y despierta el mugido de los sementales que oprime el suplicio del cercado. Ulularimbalante,
Through this concert now, everybody realizes that it's historical work and that he should be valued the way that he deserves. And I think that was a big turning point. I mean, certainly for NuMu, but in a way also for contemporary culture in Guatemala, in the sense that it really allowed us, certainly, and I think a few other people, to think big, right? And to value the legacy of some of these artists that we have that are not recognized here.
By calling it a museum, in a way we were formalizing our proposal so that it would be integrated within that cultural scene and integrated within what there should be in the country, or what's expected of a government to offer its citizens.
Whether it's private or public, there's very limited means or infrastructure to support artists altogether. However, there's an incredibly rich history and context in Guatemala that artists use as material.
Tengo una intolerancia muy grande ante la injusticia y soy hija de un juez y esto creo que se traduce en mi trabajo. Grandes temas en mi trabajo van a ser los temas de género, por supuesto. Es evidente mi condición de mujer. Temas políticos, ¿me entendés? Como cuestiones más contextuales, como el conflicto, que no fue un conflicto, sino como la guerra, ¿me entendés? En el país, o sea, esta cuestión que ahí sí le veo una relación muy cercana, ¿me entendés? A la información que surgió, que corría por mi casa, ¿verdad? Al hecho de ser hija de mi padre. Después caes en la cuenta que lo que sucede en Guatemala es un tema general, que al final tiene que ver con relaciones de poder, y entonces quizás el tema que a mí más me interesa son las relaciones de poder, ¿verdad? Ir tocándolas desde diferentes perspectivas. Yo lo que hice fue hacer una metáfora de lo que era Guatemala, ¿verdad? Este pequeño espacio aglomerado de mucha tensión y muchas emociones, así como tenés todos los climas a muy poca distancia, tenés todas las tensiones a muy poca distancia. Y eso puede ser negativo o puede ser también muy positivo, porque como ser humano tenés un aprendizaje, ¿verdad? En esta vida, en esta encarnación, pues muy amplia, porque te toca experimentar esa tensión tras tensión. Entonces, pues claro que es muy cansado, porque la problemática en Guatemala puede ser muy dura, pero al mismo tiempo, si lo analizas de una forma filosófica, pues puede ser de mucho aprendizaje.
Stefan and Jessica are running this in this very professional way, and it's very aware of the history of artists who engage with museums. But it's not just a conceptual gesture, because it's a functioning site.
Yo recuerdo que cuando los chicos fueron a hacer a NuMu el performance de los suéteres en la calle, estaba NuMu y la calle llena de gente haciendo cosas. Yo creo que esa es una característica que NuMu tiene y que compartimos con CAP, porque nosotras también tomamos mucho la calle, ¿verdad?
Alguna actividad coincidimos en que hicieron unas reinterpretaciones, instructivo de acciones, y nos invitaron para que nuestros estudiantes hicieran estas reinterpretaciones del instructivo. Como, ¿qué vamos a hacer? ¿De qué vamos a hacer? Pero empezamos a hablar un poco al nivel del cuerpo como escultura y cómo pensar en él como construcción. Y entonces a ellos mismos se les ocurrieron, como estuvieron ensayando movimientos que podían hacer para que fuera dinámico. En Guatemala, en los 90s, era muy distinto la historia que nos estaban contando dentro de la escuela y la historia que se estaba viviendo afuera. Pues no somos una institución, somos más bien como una comunidad, gente que queremos hacer de la enseñanza del arte algo diferente en un medio que todavía no entiende.
Este espacio representa necesidades, pero también representa posibilidades, pues porque sentimos que es necesario que para que funcione el arte contemporáneo necesitamos enseñar a los chicos desde pequeños que el arte contemporáneo es el resultado históricamente de un proceso de pensamiento. Para mí, la juventud, los niños, siempre será un indicador de las necesidades de la humanidad, porque el niño es más sensible a ser un receptor de lo que hace falta en este mundo.
Mi idea de museo es como un guardián, es como una caja fuerte donde guardar cosas que son importantes para la historia y para la identidad de un lugar o de una gente. Para mí es simbólico que el único museo de arte contemporáneo sea así de chiquito y que lo único que cabe es tan pequeño. Es como que la voz del arte contemporáneo es como chiquitita, pero a la vez, por eso mismo de que es una voz pequeñita, pero chistosa, pero distinta, es poderosa. We continued talking about this lack of institutional support in the country and how frustrating that was. And I think these conversations start happening when you have personal experiences and things that happen directly to you as an artist, and you start to see the need that you have for that support. And if it's not there, then what do you do? One route that we could have gone is just criticize the system and just sink into a deep frustration. But instead we started to talk about what we could do about it from our perspective, from our standpoint and resources.
It must be said that Guatemala is an incredibly racist country altogether. There is a very small empowered class that's like a whiter class, more privileged class, that has been very oppressive with the Mayan people. They're victims of these very racist politics that have been around for hundreds of years. It's the Mayan people that have suffered drastically over centuries now. They did in the colonial times, and they continue to suffer that in our current times. They were the biggest victims in the civil war that we had, and still there's a lot of attitudes from that privileged class that are so racist to the point that they don't even realize how racist they're being, right? And I think that's one of the main roles that we have as a museum, is to question these issues that we think are the broadest and most important issues of our times here. Conjuro de la Locura of Carolina Caycedo is an important project for us that we were really keen in working on, because it talks about socioeconomic situations that are affecting the country today, and environmental.
Conciencia cósmica de herencia mágica, buscando en la sombra los rastros de mi alma.
I'm not from Guatemala, and I've recently, through the exhibition at NuMu, been learning and informing myself more. What I saw also by being there is that historically there's been a big race division in Guatemalan society, but humongous. You can still feel it today, where you have what they call Ladino population, or mix, what I would be a Ladina, which is mixed blood, kind of middle class, upper class, living mostly in the cities, controlling most of the industry, local industry that first was, of course, coffee, then extraction of minerals, production of cement, for example, etc. And you have another part of the population which is indigenous, which is the majority, and that historically has been considered less than dogs. So the Conjuro de la Locura, or the Spell of Madness, puts together 3 case studies of different environmental conflicts in Guatemala. One is the Chixoy hydroelectric dam that started operations in '85. The other case study is the Mina Marlin, and the last one is an ecocide of the Rio La Pasión that happened 2015. A whole river got contaminated with tailings of a palm industry. And then all the fish died, and of course all the people living along the river lost their lifeline in a way.
In the case of Carolina's show, it's the economic forces that have owned that conversation. Like, they own the media, they pay a lot of the writers that write independent opinion pieces, and they kind of like tell them what it is that they want to do. So in the end, what they're doing is that they're owning the way that we think. If you go now to any of the local cinemas, to watch any film, in the trailers, you'll get like a 1 or 2 minute short talking about the importance of mining in Guatemala and all the benefits that mining gets in Guatemala. I mean, that's just ridiculous, right? Like, everywhere we know, like, the amount of like pollution that creates, the health hazards that it creates for the people that work there and also to the people that are around there. But here we were like fixated. I mean, the media has taught us to be absolutely fixated with this idea of progress. And progress, of course, is never really questioned, right? What is progress? Like, and progress for whom? Like, it's this idea of like, oh no, well, we need jobs, but what type of jobs is it that we need?
I knew about the Chixoy Dam because it goes in line with previous research that I've done about dams in Latin America, and Chixoy is pretty infamous regionally because there was a bunch of massacres during its construction, perpetrated mostly over Maya, Achi, women and kids. The massacres, like for me, it's to put in a simple way, is just to displace people for then an operation to come and work at ease. However, during the genocide trials, the people who are accusing the perpetrators also make us see that at the root of this is this very profound encroached racism in Guatemalan society, too. And conservative, fascist ideas of who must be alive and who mustn't, because they're not worth it. So this is also deeply ingrained in, all those killings and displacement. Who cares? Not the Ladino people, nobody cared.
Buscar mi identidad en una sociedad racista, la mente colonialista instalada en mi pupila. El reflejo en el espejo me devuelve lo que creo, si no moldeo.
That's just the amount of violence that's there in our society, right? So there's a lot of those days that you're just like, oh my God, like, what are we doing? What is this all about? But then it's also like that realization that there's a lot of work that needs to be done in order to have like a fairer, more just society, and so that's, I think, also like one of the impacts of art altogether, that you can actually segue into these subjects and kind of like have an impact in terms of like how people think about these things and how to address these issues that are so contentious to society altogether.
The journey started in Guatemala City, and in our planning we talked about how it'd be interesting to stop in certain points and to have Jessica and Stefan actually activating the museum along the way. That was their dream from the very beginning. It wasn't just about making the replica for the replica's sake, but the idea that what this provides to people in Guatemala City, that they could kind of take that act of sharing artists' work and take that on the road in the replica became very exciting. Having it here in Los Angeles is something that I love, that it's actually a functioning copy of the museum, and that it represents their ethos, it represents the whole spirit of the museum, and it represents the spirit of them as artists and curators. They actually wanted to have that energy represented through a new version of NuMu.